Number 8. The Wayy Dynasty Mummy. Archaeologists doing an excavation at China's Inner Mongolia region have uncovered some amazing finds at a 1,500-year-old cemetery. The excavations were conducted between 2012 and 2014, and according to archaeologists, the collected artifacts and human remains suggest that the burial was for members of a wealthy family, like the chieftain of the indigenous Gauish people who lived during the reign of the Northern Wayy Dynasty. This ancient tribe ruled large parts of Mongolia and northern China between 386 and 534 AD. Researchers found one of the corpses swaddled in yellow silk. The deceased individual was buried in a coffin wearing leather boots, a gold necklace, a belt, an ornament headband, and fancy rings. Archaeologists are currently in the process of carefully removing the silk garment from the skeleton to conduct further analysis. An interesting painting was also found on the coffin, depicting a house with a blue roof and bright red pillars. The team believes the cemetery may have been looted before their excavation, and had this to say. In the center of the house is seated the occupant, surrounded by his many white-faced attendants, who are standing or sitting and wearing round hoods. The exaggerated face and body proportions of the main occupant distinguish him sharply from the attendants. Along with the elaborately dressed skeleton, a silver bowl featuring a depiction of ancient Greek deities was also unearthed. According to Song Guodong from the Institute of Cultural Relics and Archaeology, the figures are actually Zeus, his wife Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. To be located in a 1,500-year-old cemetery in Inner Mongolia makes the discovery very important. Not only is it an ancient relic that deserves to be preserved, it also shows how goods and valuables were traded along the Silk Route between Asia and Europe for thousands of years. Number 7. Hidden Neolithic Sites. Who would have thought that the blistering summer temperatures across the UK landscape in the summer of 2018 would reveal a number of archaeological sites that traced back millennia of human activity? Ancient farms and settlements of Neolithic people have been popping up all across England in countless fields and farmland. But to have so many make an appearance around the same time was eye-opening. Previously invisible for many years, it turns out these stark weather conditions are helping in finding hidden and lost relics. From England to Wales and everywhere in between, newly revealed sites, including cemeteries and the outlines of Roman villas, are now visible, giving archaeologists a first-hand look at fascinating traces to the past. As droughts shriveled gardens and scorched crops, the lines of ancient archaeological sites became clear as day when viewed from the air. As grass and crops grow at different heights or in different colors, they naturally reveal the buried foundations and ditches of ancient villages and burial mounds. One of the more fascinating finds occurred in Yorkshire, where the distinctive shape of an Iron Age square barrow, or a mound of earth raised over a mass grave, was located. Other sites in Yorkshire being excavated have revealed stunning burials with grave goods inside, including chariots. Seemingly average long straight lines in prehistoric fields that stretch several kilometers in length are believed to be ritual processional routes used by ancient people. Iron Age settlements surrounding a circular ditch have also been uncovered in Cornwall, as well as Roman farms, fields, and paddocks unearthed in Devon. Number 6. Naurs, the Subterranean City. Leave it to the French to have a subterranean settlement complete with bakeries and chapels. In the hidden underground city of Naurs, 28 galleries and 300 chambers were found more than 70 feet underground, with pathways that measure from 1 to 2 miles long. It began its existence as a limestone quarry built by the Romans during the 2nd century AD. But as more conflicts rattled the countryside into the early Middle Ages, people began to use it as a place to hide from invading armies, eventually constructing wells, stables, bakeries, and chapels underground. They even constructed chimneys from the bakers' ovens. They used the heat from the fire and routed it through the cottages and other structures above ground, so no one would know they were hiding below. Viking invaders were even known to inhabit the underground settlement in the 9th century AD. It was later abandoned as Europe became more stable. The underground city was only recently discovered in 1887 by a man renovating his house. But it wasn't always a haven for peace and calm. At one time, the underground city was used as a headquarters by Nazi forces during World War II. It is now an example of how locals were able to adapt to the changing environment. The underground city of Naurs is an important part of life and history in ancient France. Would you like to see this ancient underground city for yourself? Let us know in the comments below. And if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. Number 5. Payra Castle. In the province of Homs, Syria, a 13th century castle sits high on a hill overlooking the historic site of Payra. Now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, the great city now sits in ruins. Designated a national monument in Syria in 2007, the castle sits on a raised bedrock foundation, fortified with tall, thick walls and a moat that surrounds the site, which is only accessible through a drawbridge. Built in the 13th century, the castle has been the site of conflict for many years. It was put in jeopardy in 2013 when the Syrian civil war broke out and continued to be the center of much conflict when ISIS troops took the castle in 2015. Eventually, the Syrian government succeeded in retaking the castle, but unfortunately, a lot of damage was already done. The main staircase leading to the entrances was completely destroyed. But luckily, the structures remained mostly intact, and the Syrian government declared they will restore it to its former glory. Located northeast of Damascus, Payra was once a great city and an important cultural center for the ancient world. The influence of several civilizations, including Greeks and Romans, can be seen portrayed in the art and architecture. Originally, Payra was established as a caravan oasis, mentioned in the archives of writings from the 2nd millennium BC. An important city on the trade route linking Persia, India, and China with the Roman Empire, Payra had a great colonnade street with public monuments including temples and ornamental funerary sculptures done in the Greco-Roman art style with Persian influences. In the 17th and 18th centuries, the ruined city was discovered by travelers, remaining under the rule of Romans until the 3rd century AD. Other natural causes also threatened the site, with the towers and citadel vulnerable to minor earthquakes. Now designated a national monument, the castle is protected by the National Antiquities Law, allowing conservation and restoration to not only save the site, but preserve the ancient town as well. Number 4. Mohenjo-Daro, Pakistan. In the 26th century BC, an ancient city known as Mohenjo-Daro was constructed in modern-day Pakistan. Becoming one of the largest cities in the Indus Valley civilization, the site was one of the first urban centers in human history and is one of the best preserved sites of the Indus civilization, the earliest known civilization of the Indian continent. It was built in 2500 BC, which is around the same time the pyramids were being built in Egypt. Spanning nearly 500 acres, 5 times the size of the Vatican City, archaeologists believed it was once a seat of power for the Indus civilization. It was divided in two, with the citadel and the lower town as the main areas of the site. The citadel was home to the city's monuments, including the Great Bath, a 900 square foot tank that is fed from a sophisticated water system, which also meant the ancient houses had toilets and an elaborate system of freshwater wells throughout the city. In the lower town, an intricate water system served between 20,000 and 40,000 residents. Strangely, there are no places of worship in the Mohenjo-Daro, and no government buildings or royal tombs like other major civilizations. Some believe the society wasn't built around state interests, but instead the class structure that made all the people in the site equal. 600 years later, after its first construction, the city collapsed, but no one knows why. About 4,000 years after it fell into ruin, archaeologists visited the site, and for decades they unearthed various modern-day conveniences that showed how the people of Mohenjo-Daro were years ahead of their time. Number 3. Napata and Meroe, Sudan. Just because the Sphinx and the Great Pyramid of Giza get all the attention doesn't mean there aren't other ancient sites in Africa to be discovered. Another historic city in northern Sudan, known as the Kingdom of Kush, is an important part of the cultural landscape on the continent. Part of Nubia, a region between the cataracts of the Nile, Kush is one of the most famous civilizations to emerge, with 3 kingdoms that dominated for more than 3,000 years. The most powerful city-state in the region was Kerman, which thrived between 2450 BC and 1450 BC. Known for controlling the Nile Valley between the first and fourth cataracts, Kerman was a powerful territory that was primarily rural and had about 2,000 residents who practiced agriculture, raised livestock, and hunted and fished. Their people also produced ceramics and metal goods, as well as mud brick structures and temples that were used in funerary chapels. From about 300 BCE to the 4th century CE, the capital of Meroe, a port city of Nile, held important trade routes to the Red Sea and the African interior. In an agriculturally fertile area, it was positioned next to lucrative iron and gold mines. One of the most significant artifacts of the culture were tomb pyramids, similar to those in Egypt. One main difference between the Egyptian pyramids and those at Meroe was that they didn't have tombs. Instead, the burial chambers sat beneath the pyramid. As the Roman Empire came to Egypt and dominated the people, Kush became weaker and Meroe was abandoned, leaving behind a legacy of statues, stone monuments, and elaborate paintings that detail a legendary kingdom that helped define the political and cultural landscape of Northeast Africa for more than 1,000 years. Number 2. The Hawara Labyrinth. Originally believed to be just a myth, in 2008, a team of archaeologists scanned the ground near Hawara, Egypt, and found a lost labyrinth below the sand. Discovered 56 miles south of Cairo, a huge mortuary temple once stood next to the Black Pyramid as part of a complex of buildings, galleries, and courtyards. Researchers found an array of thousands of underground halls, temples, and chambers. The structure remained hidden since the 1800s, when archaeologists first discovered the remains of a huge stone foundation 984 feet broad and 12 feet beneath the sand. Concluding that they were the remnants of the foundations for the labyrinth they thought had been destroyed long ago, archaeologists abandoned the idea that they would find anything. Then in 2008, evidence of the structure was discovered. Scanning the area using ground-penetrating radar, archaeologists found the lost labyrinth. Built by Amenemhet III, the site was described in writings by Herodotus, who claims he counted 3,000 rooms in the funeral complex in the 5th century BC. One of the most incredible ancient sites ever discovered, the underground chambers and tunnels were reportedly once surrounded by 40 columns on each side and a roof made from a single stone slab. He also detailed carved panels with paintings and elaborate hieroglyphs. The labyrinth, now rediscovered through using modern technology, could be one of the most incredible discoveries in the history of Egypt. Number 1. The mystery of the ancient Egyptian city in the United States. Sure, it may sound like a conspiracy theory, but whispers of a lost ancient city in the Grand Canyon tied to an ancient Egypt still exists hundreds of years after first revealed. In the early 1900s, as archaeologists from the Smithsonian Institute surveyed the western United States, explorers traveled down the Colorado River to Yuma to document the unexplored area. In the early 1900s, a news article described a lost city that an explorer discovered while passing the area of Lake Powell Dam. An archaeologist from the Smithsonian claims to have discovered a mysterious cavern that could trace back to the great pharaoh Ramesses in Egypt. Located a mile underground, he found a long passage that linked to a massive chamber with multiple passageways radiating from the center. Detailing several hundred rooms, he also detailed war weapons, including copper instruments within the site. He also reported a massive carving of a cross-legged god sitting with a flower in each of his hands, and urns made from copper and gold, as well as tablets of stone covered in mysterious hieroglyphs. He claims to have found a large chamber with tiers of mummies stacked on shelves, with some in clay and others wrapped in bark fabric. But is the story true? Published in the Arizona Gazette, the article was the only one ever released that detailed the underground Egyptian city hidden in the Grand Canyon. In modern times, researchers have continued to look into the report from the newspaper to determine if the ancient Egyptian city is actually real or a figment of one writer's imagination. Some wonder whether the truth about the city was hidden from the public to prevent explorers and inventors from traveling across the Grand Canyon looking for clues and putting their lives in danger. With no further evidence, the mystery of this lost city only becomes more compelling the longer the truth remains hidden.
Number 9. The Hawara Labyrinth. Imagine finding a secret labyrinth buried in the desert. In his famous 5th century work titled Histories, the Greek historian Herodotus described a massive underground temple with 3,000 rooms that were covered in paintings and hieroglyphs. He called it the Labyrinth and was not the first classic author to write about it. The fabled complex was mentioned as early as the 3rd century BC in ancient texts from multiple famous scholars, some of whom even claimed that they visited this bizarre place. Based on these accounts, it's unclear whether the labyrinth was deliberately designed to be a maze, or if its sheer enormity made it easy to get lost in. Researchers have been trying to track down the site since as far back as the 17th century, when a German Jesuit scholar named Athanasius Kircher created the first pictorial reconstructions of it based on written records, but the labyrinth remained steeped in mystery. In 2008, archaeologists reportedly found evidence of a huge structure in the sand. Many believe this could be the Hawara Labyrinth, but the Egyptian government quickly suppressed all communications about the discovery, citing national security concerns. Not surprisingly, this seems suspicious and begs the question of whether the authorities are trying to hide something that they don't want the public to know about. Number 8. Aliens built the pyramids. You've probably heard of Egypt's most famous pyramids, but did you know the alternative explanations for how they were built? It's a little wild to think that they were built over 4,500 years ago, just outside of modern-day Cairo. These monuments functioned as tombs for queens and pharaohs. And yes, how the ancient Egyptians built the pyramids without modern technology has long been a source of debate among scholars. The biggest of the structures, known as the Great Pyramid, was built from millions of precision-cut stones, weighing at least 2 tons each. Even today, building something so massive would be a major undertaking. In addition to their sheer size, the pyramids are said to align with the stars of the Orion's Belt constellation. Some conspiracy theorists believe that the pyramids were built by ancient aliens, or at least with help from extraterrestrials, that these magnificent structures simply can't be the work of mortals alone. They're too big, too accurately measured in place, not to mention, the pyramids of Giza are in considerably better shape than some newer pyramids that were built hundreds of years later. Of course, just because scientists lack an explanation for how the pyramids were built and how fast they were built, doesn't mean it was impossible for human hands to put them together. Conspiracy theories about ancient aliens building impressive monuments may seem crazy but harmless, but there's a growing school of thought that this type of pseudo-archaeology is inherently racist because it discredits the ingenuity of ancient civilizations that were non-white. Of course, most people who subscribe to beliefs about ancient aliens would be quick to dismiss those concerns and just say they're looking for answers that science isn't providing. What do you think? Is it racially insensitive to talk about aliens building the pyramids? Is it discrediting the people who are involved? Tell me your thoughts in the comment section below. Then remember to subscribe to Talltanic if you haven't already for more intense videos just like this one. Number 7. Ancient pharaohs were part alien. One of the strangest conspiracy theories about ancient Egypt, which began circulating online in recent years, claims that the pharaohs were human-alien hybrids. It's based on an Egyptian origin myth that describes the Zep-Tepi, or first time, when the gods descended from the sky in eggs or boats, sparking a so-called golden age. The theory also builds on the belief that ancient aliens helped build the pyramids, which seem impossible for humans to have built on their own given their sheer magnitude and precision. It's a leap to assume that aliens imparted their knowledge and wisdom to the civilization. It's even more outlandish to believe that extraterrestrials had babies with the ancient Egyptians. But some people will be open to pretty much anything that sounds more exciting than the boring hypothesis, which was that ancient Egyptian engineers calculated how to move these large stones with the technology available to them at the time. Number 6. The Hall of Records. Edgar Cayce, an American clairvoyant who lived during the first half of the 20th century, claimed that there's a secret library called the Hall of Records beneath the Great Sphinx of Giza. In it, he said there are invaluable historical documents. Scholars argue that there's no evidence that such a place ever existed. Egyptian archaeologists excavated the site in 1998 and claimed that they found several natural caves and no artifacts. But many people believe that the Hall of Records is real. They accuse the Egyptian government and mainstream experts of blocking outside researchers from investigating. These seemingly outlandish conspiracy theorists think that authorities deny access to the site because they're hiding something, that they're keeping secrets about what's really there. Uncovering the Hall of Records would expose a wealth of information about ancient Egypt and the world in general, according to those who believe in it. They also claim that the ancient Egyptians may not have left the documents that are supposedly inside, but that perhaps an advanced ancient society is responsible for the library's contents. Some have even suggested that the people who lived on the mythical island of Atlantis engineered the Hall of Records. What do you think? Number 5. The pyramids contain secret advanced technology. If anyone knows what's inside the pyramids of Giza, they aren't talking. Experts and government officials claim that they don't know what the pyramids contain, and that they haven't explored the structures more thoroughly because they do not want to disrespect or damage the heritage within. During the 1990s, archaeologists discovered a secret door with red writing on the outside in one of the pyramids. Using a robot, the team drilled a small hole and investigated behind the door. Nothing was found, according to Zahi Hawass, the former Minister of State of Antiquities Affairs. But he refused to procure video footage, proving that the search was fruitless and the Egyptian government would not let outside researchers explore the site. Consequently, many people speculated that the archaeologists found something fascinating and that the authorities wanted to keep it a secret from the public. The suspected contents include vast treasure, ancient technology that was shockingly advanced for its time, dead aliens, or dead or missing celebrities. In 2017, scientists announced the discovery of a void at least 100 feet long inside the largest pyramid, which is dedicated to the pharaoh Khufu. It is the first large inner structure identified within the pyramid since the 19th century and is situated above a tunnel similar in size called the Grand Gallery. The researchers did not explore the void firsthand or with cameras. Instead, they used a technology called cosmic ray muon radiography, which helps to identify solid and empty spaces in places that are inaccessible to the naked eye. They therefore don't know what the newly discovered tunnel looks like, what it was used for, or if there's anything inside it. Is it possible that these chambers house any of the items or people that conspiracy theorists believe could be in there? Mainstream scholars would say no, but other investigators beg to differ, and anything short of proof to the contrary will not convince them otherwise. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below, but first, be sure to subscribe. Number 4. Pyramid artwork that predates the pyramids. In 1907, a British archaeologist found odd carvings on an ostrich egg in a tomb containing 5,000-year-old human remains. The egg features a depiction of what looks like 3 pyramids next to a river. Naturally, one would assume that these are the pyramids of Giza, which were built beside the Nile River. But there's one major problem. Most experts believe that the pyramids were built around 4,500 years ago, making them far younger than the ostrich egg. So, is the image on the egg the result of an ancient artist being able to see thousands of years into the future? Not necessarily. For one, nobody knows for sure exactly how old the pyramids are. Because they're made of stone, it's impossible to date them using traditional scientific methods like radiocarbon dating. Moreover, the pyramids lack significant inscriptions that might otherwise help researchers properly date them, such as pharaohs' names. So perhaps there's less of a timing discrepancy than there seems to be. On another note, however, the dimensions of the triangles drawn on the egg do not proportionally coincide with the size differences between the pyramids of Giza. They also don't seem to align with the size or construction of any other pyramids, leading experts to conclude that they represent something else. But some pseudo-archaeology enthusiasts still choose to perceive the artwork as evidence that Egypt's dynastic era and the associated massive construction projects began much earlier than scholars claim. Number 3. The Sphinx is 800,000 years old. Nobody knows how old the Great Sphinx is. The ancient Egyptians left behind no written records of it, and like the pyramids, it can't be radiocarbon dated because it's made of stone. But most experts believe that the monument was constructed between 2558 and 2532 BC, during the reign of the pharaoh Khafra. In 2018, a pair of Ukrainian scientists claimed that the Sphinx is actually 800,000 years old. Citing evidence of water erosion, they theorized that it existed at a time when the Giza Plateau was partially flooded. The duo further explained that during the early Pleistocene period, there were numerous freshwater lakes in the region, and that the level of so-called erosion matches up with the water surface level at the time. Mainstream experts vehemently rejected these claims. Zahi Hawass, Egypt's former Minister of State for Antiquities Affairs, told PBS that not a single ancient Egyptian artifact or ruin more than 5,000 years old has been found. While it is certainly true that the Sphinx is shrouded in mystery, it's almost preposterous to believe it's 800,000 years old. Modern humans did not evolve until around 200,000 years ago, give or take, and people did not give up hunting and gathering in favor of permanent settlements until around 12,000 years ago. As exciting as it may seem to buy into the idea that advanced civilizations sprang up far earlier than scholars believe, it simply makes no sense. Unless, of course, you believe that ancient aliens may have put it there. At that point, all bets are off. Number 2. The pyramids were used for storing wheat. In 2015, then presidential candidate Ben Carson made headlines for his belief that the biblical character Joseph actually built the pyramids for storing grain. Most people are taught at a young age that the pyramids were pharaohs' tombs. This makes it difficult to understand how a highly educated person like Ben Carson, who is a neurosurgeon by day, could subscribe to a biblical theory that runs contrary to scholarly knowledge. But he's not the only person who believes this. The granary theory is based on the Old Testament, which describes how Joseph's brothers sold him into slavery in Egypt. Joseph interpreted a pharaoh's dreams and took them as a sign to store grain, which helped Egypt survive a 7-year famine. The Bible does not mention the pyramids. According to the BBC, people began incorporating them into the story during the Middle Ages. Speaking with the news outlet, Egyptologist John Darnell pointed out that the medieval St. Mark's Cathedral in Venice features an image of people using the pyramids of Giza as granaries. A 6th century bishop named Saint Gregory of Tours encouraged this belief, describing Joseph's grain storage structures as, quote, wide at the base and narrow at the top, end quote. The theory persisted until the Renaissance, when it fell out of favor amid more thorough studies of the pyramids. Which is good, because it's probably untrue. As Darnell mentioned, the pyramids predate the time of the story of Joseph by several centuries. He also explained that the pyramids' design would be inefficient and impractical for storing grain. But as Ben Carson proved to the world just 6 years ago, there are still some die-hard believers who reject scholarly thought. Number 1. The ancient Egyptians traveled to the Americas. It's a well-established fact that the ancient Egyptians drank wine and were involved in the opium trade. But it came as a surprise when in 1992, German toxicologist Svetla Balabanova and her two colleagues reported findings of cocaine, nicotine, and hashish in Egyptian mummies. Many experts were quick to dismiss these claims, since those drugs are derived from plants that are endemic to the Americas. But some people took the findings as evidence that the Egyptians beat Columbus to the New World by several thousand years. After all, what other explanation could there be? There are a few possibilities, believe it or not. Of course, the mummies could have easily been contaminated by their surroundings over the years. Also, the mummies could be forgeries, which were popular during the 19th century amid poor record keeping. And there's the chance that the tests performed on the mummies yielded false positives for drugs. Above all, historians do not believe a pre-Columbian trade route existed between the Americas and Egypt. Is it impossible? No, but there's no evidence of the ancient Egyptians making transoceanic voyages, making it highly unlikely. If industrial commerce had occurred, there would likely be more in the way of artifacts and records to prove it. Not all researchers are dismissive of the findings, however. Some take it as a sign that we underestimate the capabilities of ancient societies, and that we tend to think of them as primitive and lacking mobility. Number 10. Severed fingers. In a shocking discovery, researchers have found evidence that prehistoric humans, our ancient ancestors who used to live in caves, would sometimes cut off their very own fingers in order to satisfy the bizarre deities that they worship. This discovery comes thanks to cave paintings in France, dated back 27,000 years, that show hands that have missing fingers. For a very long time, archaeologists couldn't figure out why so many hands were painted this way. It was a team of archaeologists working with the Simon Fraser University who figured out these people were cutting off their fingers in bizarre religious rituals that were undoubtedly very painful. Why were they doing this? Experts say it was an experience that may have helped some of the earliest groups of humans form strong bonds with one another. Researchers went back through historical records all the way to the 1600s looking for examples of finger amputation. The team was surprised to find that on every single continent inhabited by humans, there's at least one example of this disturbing practice. At least 121 societies throughout history have engaged in finger amputation, and those are the only ones that we know of. The cave we talked about earlier has hand paintings from at least 50 people, some of them even children. A large portion of them were missing their fingers. However, the only thing researchers don't know is what these rituals look like or who exactly practiced them. Number 9. Baby mummy. There is a baby mummy in St. Louis. The mummy was acquired by a dentist named Herman Moe at the turn of the century. He got it from somewhere in the Middle East, and the mummy ended up getting lost in the attic of one of his relatives before it was ultimately donated to the St. Louis Science Center back in 1985. We don't know exactly where the mummy came from, but by using new technology, researchers have figured out a little bit about its past. By analyzing the DNA, they learned that he had a European mother who most likely came from a wealthy family. They also learned that the mummy lived sometime between 30 BC and 130 AD, during the Roman period of Egypt somewhere around the time of Cleopatra. CT scans showed that the child was only around 7 months old at the time of death, and also that he had a hole in his skull through which the brain was drained like wet jelly as part of the mummification process. And finally, the scans showed the incisions on one side of the child's body through which his internal organs had been removed and put inside of jars. But here's how the scientists know the child's mother was wealthy. They discovered amulets inside the child's body cavity and hidden within wrappings. These amulets were put inside the child as protection for its soul, while the cocoon of the wrappings protected its body. Number 8. Skinned cats and pagan rituals. 1,000 years ago in Spain, farmers were skinning cats as part of a weird magical ritual. Scientists found evidence of this bizarre practice at the archaeological site of El Bordellet in the east of the country. Highway construction back in 2010 led workers to discover a small trove of medieval artifacts. In more recent excavations in the same area, researchers found 9 mysterious pits, with some of them being filled entirely with animal bones. These bones are from pigs, horses, dogs, and even goats, but one of the pits had a bizarre amount of feline remains. There were about 900 cat bones found inside the pit, with one of them carbon dated at being from somewhere between the years 970 and 1025 AD. These cats were skinned. Scientists determined this because of cut marks on the bones consistent with what you get when skinning an animal. All the cats were between 9 and 20 months old when they died, the age at which cat fur is best used, apparently. This isn't alarming right away, as skinning cats to make clothing has been going on for a very long time. The cat fur trade was even booming in the Middle Ages. However, these cats were skinned for a different reason. This was magic. Along with the cat bones, archaeologists found horse skulls, fragments of goat horn, and chicken eggshells. This was definitely part of some kind of strange magic ceremony, but what kind is unknown. Did you know that cat pelts were popular for clothes? What do you think of this? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section down below, and if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. Number 7. Castle Sacrifices. The skeletons of 3 humans murdered as part of a weird sacrifice have been found within the foundations of a castle in South Moravia, dating back 1,000 years. The castle is in the Czech town of Břeclav, and the people here died in 1041 AD. The castle was once a strategic stronghold on the Dyje River, protecting the area from attacks. Archaeologist Miroslav Dejmal of the Masaryk University says the people were most likely murdered while the castle was being built and then literally made into its foundation, as he says the chances of all 3 men dying by accident is pretty slim. Their bodies were placed on the first layer of stones being used to construct a rampart. We don't know who these men are right now, but the experts say they could have been prisoners of war, being used as slaves to build the stone walls before they were executed. There's actually a term for this that archaeologists use: foundation sacrifice. It happened more in medieval times than most people realize. In the Dark Ages, some people believed that building a structure on natural land was an indignity to the deities of that land. To appease them, people were often murdered and then their bodies mixed in with the foundations. Some historians believe foundation sacrifices were the inspiration for the haunted house stories we still talk about today. Number 6. Pompei Mummy. Archaeologists working in the ruined Italian city of Pompei have discovered a scary, partially mummified skeleton. The skeleton was once a slave who toiled in the city of Pompei before it was decimated by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in the year 79 AD. Experts say that so far, this is the best preserved skeleton they have ever found in the city. Shockingly, the dead man still has white hair clinging to his scalp. He was found buried inside an ancient tomb in the necropolis of Porta Sarno, located in the urban center of Pompei. At this point, you might be wondering why a slave was discovered inside of his very own tomb. Well, archaeologists are trying to piece together that story. They discovered him beneath a marble slab with an inscription on it that identified him as Marcus Venerius Secundio. He was definitely wealthy at the time of his death, but he had been born poor and at one point had even been a slave before being freed. An inscription on his tomb appears to indicate that he helped stage performances of Greek plays. It reads that the deceased gave Greek and Latin ludi or performances. Wax tablet records kept by a Pompeian banker note that Secundio was enslaved and he served in the Temple of Venus, but he rose through the social ranks once he was freed and then joined the Augustalis priesthood, an imperial cult. Secundio died when he was about 60 and was buried in the impressive tomb befitting his improved social status just before the volcano blew its top. Number 5. Midland Kings. Over the couple hundred years, at least 150 bodies have been pulled out of the bogs in Ireland. Nobody is exactly sure why so many people were buried in the Irish bogs, but experts say they were likely victims of murder. Even more shocking is that the Irish bog bodies were almost always killed using excessive violence. Many of the bodies recovered from the bogs in modern times have been found with their throats slit open, stabbed repeatedly in the heart, and cut up as if by a mad butcher. Ned Kelly, former employee of the National Museum of Ireland, believes the reason these people were murdered so brutally and dumped into bogs is that they were in fact Midland Kings, rulers of the Midlands, where all the most important kingdoms were in ancient Ireland. He thinks they were massacred on purpose after volunteering to give up their lives for the goddess they believed looked after their fertile lands. But there's more to it than that. For example, a bog body known as Old Krogan Man was discovered in a bog back in 2003 with his nipples cut off. Ouch. In medieval Ireland, cutting off someone's nipples was a type of torture reserved for dethroning a king. During hard times in Ireland, the first one to be sacrificed for the good of the nation to the goddess was always the ruler. So the theory here is that all the scary bog mummies that have turned up are actually dead Irish kings brutalized by their own people during hard times. Number 4. Ancient infants. Excavators working at the Upper Sun River archaeological site in central Alaska have made a tragic, terrifying, and rather surprising discovery. They have uncovered the skeletons of 2 young infants buried together beneath what had once been a hut used by early Native Americans. Analysis of the bones show that one of the infants had died after birth, while the other was just a fetus and had been stillborn. Radiocarbon dating proved that they were laid to rest over 11,000 years ago. That's before basically any developed culture in the world. Even more shocking is that the DNA showed that the infants came from different mothers that belonged to genetically distinct groups. In other words, they were not from the same ethnic background. What begins as a shocking and tragic story turns into one that's quite fascinating, as this shows that the first people who moved into America across the Bering Land Bridge from Asia were from different backgrounds. This is an area of history that scientists have been struggling for years. We know that the first migrants into America came from Siberia, but scientists haven't been able to figure out if these people came in waves or as one large, ethnically diverse group. Now, with the discovery of these 2 babies being buried together in the same hut but from 2 different backgrounds, it's safe to say that the first Americans were a very diverse group. Number 3. Demon traps. Demon traps have been found in ancient Sardis in modern-day Turkey. These demon traps were discovered buried under the floor of an ancient house, crafted 2,000 years ago. The archaeologists who found the demon traps believe they were part of a ritual to stave off disaster. They were likely built after an earthquake devastated Sardis in the year 17 AD. They were found under the floor of a room that had been built after the quake, probably by whoever lived there in hopes that the next earthquake wouldn't bring their roof down again. But what does a demon trap look like? Each demon trap consists of a bowl with a few quirky artifacts inside of it, an eggshell, some bronze nails, and a coin. One of the coins had the depiction of Zeus Ledios on it, the father god of the local religion at the time. Another coin had the image of Cybele on it, another popular goddess that was heavily worshipped. For an unknown reason, eggs and bronze tools have been used for millennia to protect people against evil forces, often being found in witch bottles and anywhere associated with cult magic. These traps weren't actually made to catch demons, but they were artifacts meant to have magical powers. Number 2. The Black Drink. Researchers investigating the ruins of Cahokia, a massive settlement near the Mississippi River that was last inhabited by Native Americans around 700 years ago, have found a mysterious black drink. The discovery of the black drink was made by analyzing plant residue found inside pottery beakers uncovered from the surrounding area. And while at first it seems a bit creepy to know that the ancient people here had been drinking black liquid out of beakers, they may have actually just been a bunch of caffeine addicts. The black brew was made from the leaves of the holly tree and heavily caffeinated. It is so far the earliest known use of the black drink. Cahokia itself is also quite the mystery. It was one of the biggest cities north of the Aztec Empire that appeared in the year 1100 and then vanished 200 years later, leaving behind only a spattering of relics and no large ruins or temples to speak of. Europeans first recorded the Native Americans consuming the black drink when they arrived a few hundred years later. It was a type of tea made from roasted leaves of the yapan holly that contained caffeine. The drink wasn't really coffee though, as it was 6 times stronger than the strongest coffee available today. It often induced sweating, vomiting, and general sickness. It was only consumed before battle or before extremely important events. It was basically like drinking pure black caffeine and getting so caffeinated that you barfed everywhere. And if you ask me, it seems like the worst possible thing to drink before going into battle. Number 1. Scary Stone Mask. A stone mask that looks like something a psychopath would wear while torturing someone in their basement had been unveiled by the Antiquities Authority in Israel. The stone mask dates back 9,000 years and is unlike anything archaeologists have found before. The mask features 2 wide eye holes, a thin mouth with the etchings of teeth around it, and a short nose. It was also drilled along its edges so that a person could secure it to their face using string. Nobody knows what on earth this terrifying mask was used for, if it had belonged to a local magician or some kind of Neolithic maniac. Unfortunately, archaeologists don't even know where it came from. It was acquired by a theft prevention unit back in 2018, confiscated from somebody who got it from somebody else, leaving archaeologists in the dark as to the origins of the haunting mask. And although nothing exactly similar has been found before, there are 15 masks known to scientists that date back to around the same time as this one, between 9,000 and 10,000 years ago. But these are held in private collections, and archaeologists haven't been able to study them, so they don't know if the masks all belong to a prehistoric cult or what. Thanks for watching. Which of these disturbing discoveries freaked you out the most? Let us know about it in the comments, and if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe for all the best videos from the channel. See you next time, bye!